Hi, I'm Trisha Morris from Club Scrap, and welcome to the Mon Amour Page Kit workshop. Can't wait to create these pages with you. Let's go ahead and get started. I had to look up how to pronounce that. I'm not really too good at my French. I work on my Spanish, so this is French. And I know all the French friends out there will be able to say it on my behalf. So thank you in advance for your understanding with my lack of knowledge of the language. Either way, you don't need to speak French to make this beautiful kit into pages. I've got my accordion pocket file here that I'm going to use to stay organized. If you don't have one of those, just reach out to us at Club Scrap. Then I will set aside all of the beautiful embellishments that came in the box, the ribbon, that gorgeous washi tape. We'll talk more about that later. I have printed the instructions that are included with the kit, so that's going to help us get started. Now take the entire stack of paper. Let's place it in the order that we'll be trimming it. So we'll begin with cutting the label print actually. So that's this one with the black striped background. And I'm gonna take just one sheet of that and put it face down on my trimmer, followed by one Eiffel Tower print. So just one of those to go face down. Next up you can search for is just the single lonely sheet of this lovely taupe pattern paper. You can see there's just a real subtle pattern and it's on both sides of the paper. It's pretty cool. So just the one sheet of that. Then 2 sheets of red metallic. Now this paper is just scrumptious. It's the same on both sides. You don't need to worry about that. And then all 3 sheets of gray will be trimmed. I just love this color for the collection. And typically from the back of your stack, you're going to find Cutaparts. Now there's one that has mostly border strips on it, so that's the next sheet, and I want that face down, followed by the other sheet of printed Cutaparts, and you'll recognize it from the back of the stack. Then I want you to find 2 sheets of the light pink, or pink plain. One's metallic, one is not. So the one that is not metallic, a pair of those. Then a pair of the metallic pink that has the ridge on it. How about one black, and then one of the remaining label prints, then the other black, and the other remaining label print. Okay, now we'll flip that whole stack back over to where we started with our label print at the top. And let's get trimming. Now I'm using my Fisker's guillotine trimmer. If you don't have one of these, I highly recommend it. You can limp along with something else, but again, something like this with the stabilizing bar, with a leveling ridge, with your marks every 1/4 inch, that's what you're looking for in a nice, useful trimmer for our needs right now. So, all right, so place this first sheet into the trimmer so it's sideways, so that the top is facing left, okay? And I want you to cut at 9 and make sure your paper is flush with the top edge here. Stabilize on that clear bar and then slice. Then slide down all the way to 3. And take this 3-inch piece and place that in pockets 7 and 8 at an angle so you're not jamming it down into the pocket. Then this wider strip here, let's trim this at 8 and 4, and place these 3 pieces in pocket 7 and 8, and then you have this long strip again that also goes in 7 and 8. And we're moving on to the next sheet in the stack, which is the Eiffel Tower print. We've got some nice easy cuts here at 7 and 3. So we've isolated the Eiffel Tower. We'll put that in 5 and 6, again at an angle. And then this one with the little amour on it goes in 1 and 2. And then the one with the heart still intact here on the right, that goes in 5 and 6. And we're moving on to the taupe pattern. So far, so good. Let's start this trimming at 6 1/4. So the quarters are marked in those columns. You just find the hole number 6, go 1 column to the left of the 6 to grow that number to 6 1/4. Then rotate the paper so it's horizontal and cut at 8 1/2 and 4 1/4. Stack up those 2 rectangles, and that goes in pocket 7 and 8. We're going to do a real typical move here. The remaining rectangle that fell off the end first, we'll cut that at 6 and 3. And that gives you 2 rectangles of the same size for pocket 7 and 8. And we also created a small scrap during the process, set that aside. And then we'll trim the remaining long strip at 11 1/4, 7 1/2. Again, now that's 2 columns to the left of the 7. And then 3 3/4. That's 3 columns to the left of the 3. Gather those rectangles up. They should all be the same size if everything went well. If it didn't, it's okay. Still gather up the pieces you made and place them in pocket 1 and 2. Hang on to this little scrap. We might have a use for that in the future. And we're already at the red metallic. We're only going to trim 1 of these, so make sure you only have 1 sheet, and we'll start out at 10 3/4, 9 1/2, and 6 1/4. Rotate the 6 1/4 so it's horizontal. Cut at 8 1/2 and 4 1/4. We just made 2 pieces the same. Those are rectangles for pocket 3 and 4. And then the one that fell off the end, we will once again trim it at 6 and 3. And the 2 rectangles go in pocket 1 and 2, followed by a scrap for the scrap pile. And then take the next strip. This one is 3 1/4 by 12 right now. We start out at 11 1/4, 9, 6, and 3. So now I have this rectangle, the next one that fell, and the next one. They should all be the same size. That goes in pocket 3 and 4. And then we have a smaller rectangle for 1 and 2. And I'm sorry to tell you, this is another scrap, but again, don't dispose of it quite yet. And we've got 2 strips of the same width for pocket 3 and 4. Moving on to the next sheet of the red metallic. And we're going to start again here at 6 1/4. That's a real common measurement. We're creating photo mats. Rotate. And let's trim at 10 3/4. This is a little different. Then 8 1/2. That's common. And 4 1/4. Also common. So these 2 rectangles, again, same size. So are you seeing a pattern here? We're going to do this a couple more times even. Both of these go in 5 and 6. Then you have a narrow rectangle here for 1 and 2. And an even narrower strip, that's a scrap. Pick up the entire rest of this sheet. Let's cut at 11 1/4, 7 1/2, 3 3/4. Stack up the pieces the same for pocket 5 and 6. I regret to inform you we have yet another scrap, and we're moving on to all of the gray papers. Okay, let's trim 1 gray at 11 1/4, 10 1/2, and 6 1/4. Now rotate the 6 1/4 so it's horizontal, and we'll trim at 11 3/4, 8 1/2, and 4 1/4 again. The 2 the same together in pocket 1 and 2. And we have sort of a skinny rectangle, that's 7 and 8, and a scrap. The remaining larger strip we'll trim at 6 1/4. These pieces are not the same size, but they both go in pockets 7 and 8. And then we have these 2 strips the same size for 5 and 6. On this sheet, I ended up having like a lot of narrow strips of gray left. I mean, I trimmed 3 sheets of it, and I used up a lot of what would have been scraps, and I used them as paper ribbons. So I cut them into really narrow strips, and they add a lot to the page, and they sort of do a fake. You'll know what I mean in a minute, but bear with me as we trim tons and tons of narrow strips. So our first cut's at 11 3/4. That's way over here. It's 1 column to the right of the 12. Then go 11 1/2, 11 and a quarter, 11. Just keep letting those pieces pile up. Continuing on, 10 and 3/4, 10 and a half, almost there, 10 and a quarter, and 6, all the way down to 6. Okay, rotate the 6 by 12. We're going to cut at 8, 4, and rotate this 4-inch piece and cut it at 3. These 2 rectangles go in pocket 3 and 4. And the next 2 pieces that match, 5 and 6. And then we'll pick up this largest remaining piece and trim at 11 and 3/4, 9 and a half, and 4 and 3/4. These 2 pieces go in pocket 3 and 4. You have a skinny piece for 5 and 6, and a small scrap, if you can find it, among all of the other narrow little pieces. Okay, so here we have all kinds of these. I want you to find 1, 2, 3, 4 of them go in pocket 3 and 4, and there should be 3 left. Those go in 7 and 8. We're gonna make 1 more of those little strips out of this guy. Okay, so let's start out at 11 and 3/4, then 10 and 3/4, 9 and 3/4, 7 and a half, 4 and a quarter. Rotate the 4 and a quarter, trim at 6 and a quarter, creating 2 pieces that are not the same, and they both go in 5 and 6. The next strip, this one is currently 3 and a quarter by 12. We'll cut at 11, 8 and a quarter, 5 and a half, 2 and 3/4. 2 of these rectangles go in pocket 1 and 2. 2 of them go in 7 and 8. And this is a scrap. The next strip, which is 2 and a quarter by 12, we'll cut at 10, 7 and 3/4, 5 and a half, 3 and a quarter. The piece that ended in your trimmer, pocket 3 and 4. Then you're going to find 1, 2, 3 squares. Those go in 7 and 8. And you have this kind of little piece at the end that also goes in 7 and 8. And then the remaining strips all are placed in 1 and 2. Okay, now we've arrived at Cutaparts, and it's going to just take a second for us to prepare these. Everything from the line in the corner to the outside of the edge of the paper needs to go away. And you'll see just a guide in every single corner on your sheet. So when I start trimming away that paper, the first time I make a cut, I'm going to make a generous one, in other words, just outside of the line, because when I rotate it, now that the paper is a little shorter, I can see the edge of my blade on my trimmer both at the top and the bottom corner and get a more accurate cut. Then I'll simply rotate again and again. This time I can look over here at the 12, and it doesn't quite line up, so I'm going to shave a little more off the other end when I get back there. And then 1 more with this edge, clean that up, and then I'll clean this edge up here too. So then I end up with a really nice 12 by 12, and then a little pile of scraps. After you get rid of those, you can rotate the paper so it's positioned in the trimmer with the black strips on the right where it says "You Make Me Happy." And our first cut will be at 10 and a half. Then 9, 8 and a quarter, 7 and a half, 5 and a half, 3.5. This piece, when we have each other, pocket 3 and 4. And the next two pink strips for 7 and 8. And then you have these fun little triangular pieces, 1 and 2. And make sure you're grabbing the black strip that does not have text. That goes in 7 and 8. And then the one that says, "You make me happy," 1 and 2. We have one more piece to trim of these Cutaparts. Once again, I need to follow that same routine here and just remove the outer perimeter using those guidelines. Again, cutting generously so that you can see the bottom and top for perfect alignment. Go all the way around all 4 edges. Once you do 2 edges, you can again look at the 12 on the left, and you see that little thin hair I removed on my last cut. This trimmer just does a great job. Okay, so I'm rotating again to where it says "You're pretty much my most favorite of all time." That should be on the right. And let's cut at 11. And 10. 9.5. 9. 7. And 4. Nice whole numbers for you. And in keeping with that, we'll rotate. Make sure you are all kinds of amazing. That should be at 10 on your right, and then 6. This piece goes in pocket 5 and 6. And the circle, 3 and 4. All kinds of amazing, 5 and 6. And now we have our next strip with the 3 hearts and journaling lines on your right. That's 10, 8, and 6. All right, this one goes in 7 and 8. Now for those journaling prompts, "You make me happy," that goes in 7 and 8 also. Mon Amour, 3 and 4. And then we have our 3 hearts, 1 and 2. Oh, we're almost finished. We'll trim this with make sure the Harlequin pattern's on your right. That's 10, then 8, and 6. With this larger 6-inch piece, Je t'aime, I think, 1 and 2. And we have the 3 squares. Place those in 7 and 8. The 2 pieces that have the stripes for 5 and 6. And the 2 remaining strips will go in 3 and 4. That's it. That's it for the trimming. Hallelujah. Set that trimmer aside. And I always make sure you support this. Make sure it doesn't fall on the floor. With the remaining piles of paper that you have already sorted out, just take the whole stack and pull the sheet from the top, just one sheet from the top, and spread them out side by side like this. And that's what's going to give you the base for layouts 7 and 8. And we'll end up working backwards after we slide each page over and load it with the appropriate items from our pockets. You'll end up with page 1 at the top, knowing everything's been properly placed. And then all you have to do is adhere everything, which, you know, that's the fun part. All the intellectual work is done. You can relax into this phase of the operation. Now let's take everything out of pocket 7 and 8. Being mindful, we're going to work our way backwards, so same is true for the pockets. And I've done this backwards method for a long time, and it really seems to work pretty well. So I hope you agree. And also in your directions, let's just take a look at the bottom of page 4. You can see layout 7 and 8 right there. That's our key. That's like the lid to our box that we have. All the answers are there. And we can take, let's see, I think it's this, one of these narrow pieces. We'll do this one. Doesn't matter. De Cologne. I don't know any French, so bear with me. That's going to go flush top. And then this is going to be flush bottom on the right. I just love how this page literally does puzzle together. Then you have one of your little paper ribbons here. And what I like to do is adhere this wider piece, and then I keep our bookbinding glue in a needle tip applicator, and you can see I need to reload my applicator with some glue. And then you just run the tip of the applicator along the edge of the paper. Just let the paper guide the nozzle. and then lay the strip on top of the glue. Works like a charm. Okay, now there's a larger gray mat that's going to be vertical and then nested with just one of these printed pieces. I realize it's going to get covered. Now we have let's see, a border. It says Mon Amour. That's going to go right below this one, and that other strip, I love every moment with you, goes right here. So it fits, just fits so nice. Then from that taupe pattern, it should fit also vertically. I love it. Just puzzles right in there flawlessly. And then 2 more of these printed mats vertically there. You have the long strip of vertical there. So now what we're doing is creating a box around these 2 things. So that's what controls this spacing on the left here when you finally do adhere everything. We're not going to do any adhering right now, but you get the idea. Then you have like this one, the shorter photo mat goes here, and you have a narrow mat that just happens to be this perfect size for this to nest onto. And then from the taupe, you have these rectangles, and those can be added, and look how they just frame right in there as well. They fit just like a puzzle, and you should have 2 pieces of gray that layer right onto that. Now from the gray, again, 3 squares. I forgot this other piece goes here. That improves the fit even more. And that's why we do this kind of fitting ahead of time, because it allows us to make corrections or changes as we go. Then we have the love you so much, and in the middle we just put our little Harlequin squares. You make me happy. That's going to go over here on the left, and then this little guy will go horizontally up here within that area. Lots of room for photos. Remember, even if there's a cut apart, if you have a lot of photos, you can just add them right over the top of the artwork. Fill in the spaces as much as you want, because the photos really still are the priority of these pages. Now to look at some details here, the this silk ribbon is so easy to work with. It's so beautiful, and I did my double looped bow technique here. I don't know that I've shown it in a while. Let me just quick show you how I did that little number. I'll get up my adhesive. This is my ATG gun, one of my favorite workhorse tools. So the big 3 is the trimmer, the ATG, and its adhesive. Of course, my grid ruler. Those are my basics. Now, I kind of liked the center of my knot to occur on the, just kind of above the text here, but I'll take my fabric scissors and just trim a length of ribbon that's just a little wider, at least an inch on each side than the piece itself. I'll fold one of the ribbons in half, grab some tape. Seems to be kind of the easiest thing. So I'll pick this up and I'll line up the fold of the folded ribbon just above this text here, and I'll wrap the rest of it around to the back and tape it. So that's what's going to give me my positioning. Okay, and you can just see it wing out to the left, no big deal. Now ribbon has a grain too, so before I try to fold it in half, I make sure I'm cooperating with the direction of the fold, and I'm going to thread it through the first loop that I made and even out the ends. And I'll give this a little tug. Turn the ribbon, or arrange it any way you like. Oh, it's so pretty. I love this ribbon. Okay, see that? And then just bring it around to the back. Come in with my second piece of tape. And I've got a beautiful double looped bow here, or a chain link bow, whatever you want to call it. Oh, isn't that pretty? Fun, right? Now that was here. Now over here, I used bookbinding glue to cover all of the perimeter of the back of that charm, or this fleur-de-lis accent, any kind of raised area. And then I placed it on top of this, and I put my tape, sand-filled tape holder, tape dispenser on top of it until it dried. Didn't take long, maybe, I don't know, a few minutes, not that long. So that's kind of how I did that piece. Now looking over at the other page, again, everything's pretty straightforward. Here I did add a bow. Looks like I need to tighten it. And I topped the charm with a little bit of waxed cord just to kind of bring the eye to it. It's such a beautiful charm. Over here I did a 2-loop trick. So I just took like a 2-inch piece of that really wide gray ribbon, threaded it through the tag top, which I punched a hole with my slot punch. Threaded it through and taped a loop so that just this loop is sticking up here. Took a separate piece of the pink taffeta, tied a knot into it, trimmed the ends at an angle, slapped it on there with a glue line, right? So simple. And that's pretty much it for these two lovely pages. And at this point, I'm not going to sit here and glue this with you. You can adhere everything on your own time. Then I'll slide this on over on top of page 8, and then slide this on top of that. And now I can empty the contents of the appropriate pocket, which is 5 and 6. And once again, I have my answer key handy here. And so I'll take a look at that while I distribute all of these pieces. Again, I'll begin with this larger section of the Eiffel Tower print on the right, flush, and then this Eiffel Tower itself on the left. I think a good spot to go next would be just in this upper right corner of the left side with our 2 metallic red mats nested with the gray. Kind of a pretty blue gray, kind of like how the skies of Paris were when I was there a number of years ago. And then we have a horizontal strip of gray nested with this. And there should be a shorter photo mat that can go here, horizontal, and then this narrow rectangle right aligned with the top edge and with that nesting onto it. Now on the right, I'm going to add 1, 2, 3 of those red metallic rectangles. And then this strip will go right up against the edge of the print, followed by the striped border, and then these 2 nest. Those are all the pieces. Now you're going to notice some of these postage washi tape stickers here down in the lower left corner. And I actually saved some of my scraps so I could put a sticker on it so I could back it with something, or you can just put them directly onto the thing and they just tear off just like postage. So you can literally do whichever ones you think fit the best, whichever art you like the best. It can just be placed right where you want it, okay? Super handy. If you have trouble getting the roll started, just, cut along one of the dotted lines. That's just how it, or if you just carefully feel with your fingernail, eventually you'll find the end of the tape, but it seems to line up perfectly. It's kind of hard to identify. So to review the finishing touches here, I've got something really cool I want to show you. Here I did another one of those double looped bows, but do you see how the Eiffel Tower is not wood? It looks like it's a piece of metal. So I tapped my wood piece onto our white pigment ink. You can also use any embossing ink or any kind of pigment ink. Then I sprinkled it with silver embossing powder, and I used my heat gun to melt the powder. If you're not familiar with any of these steps, don't worry about doing this. Just add that gorgeous woodcut right there and it will be fine. I just decided to level up here and use some of my other supplies that don't get much love. And I embossed that pretty tower. I did both of them. So if you're doing one, might as well do both, right? On the facing page, again, I just backed these with some of the taupe scrap that I had. Otherwise, you can just put them directly onto your paper. Doesn't matter. And then a piece of folded ribbon was stapled at the top of this text and just added. And the ribbon obviously goes into the border strip, no problem. And I've got 2 gorgeous pages all ready to go. Now it's time to pick up the metallic pink from the left, slide it onto the right, and then one more slide over to the right to have the black next to the print. And if you're like me, you're turning to your previous page in your instructions, working backwards to layouts 3 and 4. And I'll take the contents of 3 and 4 pocket out. And I do like to just distribute all the pieces from my hand, if you haven't noticed. Sometimes I drop things, but it's kind of a good way to do it. Let's see. I'll get rid of this large piece here. To the right of it, we're going to be adding these 3 red metallic pieces, and those should be placed horizontally. Then this is going to go right up against that, leaving about an 1/8 inch between this piece and the red. And then there should be 2 kind of oddly shaped. I went as wide as I could here. Yeah, they go horizontal. That's right. That's why. So because this was 4 3/4, I knew the height of this couldn't be any higher than 4 1/4, because one side is going to be 4 inches of your 4 by 6, right? So then we have a piece of red. Just kind of center that with the remaining space and then nest it with In the History of Ever, which is the second half of the sentiment. And then we got one of these narrow strips above and below it. So we're like faking it that there is a piece behind here that's really wide, but it's really only 1/4 of an inch. I hope that made sense. And then we have 2 angled photo mats up here. And then you can cut this into a circle, or you can use a thin die cut if you have a circle that size. I almost recommend just cutting it because I had it slightly off center when I did it with my die cutting and it was just a little off. Then this nests, nesting time. Get it pretty high up there because that allows this to be placed kind of within the middle of the strip. You don't want it touching the edges of the strip, forming a tangent. Then this should nest, and we have that going on up here for your journaling prompt. And then once again, I used the washi tape postage right down in this area here. If you wanted to even back them with white paper, it can make them pop a little bit, or I used red in this case, some of my scraps that I had on hand. So for finishing touches, I utilized the charm here and attached it the same way with the bookbinding glue. On this one, I once again used my slot punch to put a hole in the top of the tag, threaded it with the gray ribbon, taped that on the back, and then a single piece of taffeta pink, tied a knot into it, and glued it to the page. It's a great optical illusion and very straightforward there for everything else. So on the facing page here, I've got these nested onto some of the scraps that I had of the red metallic. And then here, again, added the fleur-de-lis to the circle, and that's that. Very, very simple. I love it when a page comes together like that. Now, one more slide and stack here. Things will move around, but that's okay. It's easy to put everything back together when you're going to adhere it. And then finally, pages 1 and 2, we'll want to empty the pockets for that. I'll clear it out and put everything back in the hand if you can. And I'll add this strip to the right here, followed by the You Make Me Happy. Oh, and in between that, I use one of my gray paper ribbons. Okay, now in the the taupe pattern will distribute nice and evenly in the opening spot. Doesn't that look good? Now here I have a gray right about there. Look in the tower. And then another gray right about here. And then you can nest either one you wish onto those strips. Then a gray horizontal, and on the bottom here on the right you've got this narrow strip of metallic, and that's going to be nested with the Je t'aime, and then a vertical that should be the same height as that. Here you have a rectangle that's red metallic nested with more gray, and then this nests onto the red metallic and is added right here. Again, you don't have to do all the other embellishing stuff I'm about to share with you, especially if you don't care for some of those crazy craft knife techniques, but you know, and same with this. Adding the wood, the silver embossing to it gives it a cool look, but that's purely optional. The hang hole on the woodcut was large enough that I could actually thread the pink taffeta through it. If you just cut a really, slanted edge on the ribbon, it just slid right in there. Added a couple more of those sweet little vintage washi paper stamps. Love that. Everything else is straightforward. And then on this side, I tied some more wax linen onto the charm. I used my slot punch, and if you're not familiar with the slot punch, we do carry this. This is what it is. It's a real workhorse. Again, one of my favorite basic tools, and it puts a really nice oval-shaped slot into any piece of paper, thus turning it into a tag without having to spend all this extra money on die cutting equipment and tags. It's just a rectangle cut with an angle and slot punch. Wrap that ribbon around to the back and taped it. Now, the last sort of specialish thing I did here was use my craft knife to cut along 2 slots, one on each side of the Eiffel Tower here, and the height of the slot matches the height of what I'm threading through it. So my border strip goes behind the paper, behind that Eiffel Tower, and comes out the other side. This, I just did the same type of thing where I cut a slot and this slides in and never really comes out, right? Because it goes to the edge. So I have the Eiffel Tower remaining in the foreground for that whole piece. Again, if you're not in the mood to do that, totally okay. Simply lay this on top and the eye will still complete the Eiffel Tower. It will just know that there's this there and that is there and you're fine. But it was just kind of something, you know, leveling up if you can, if you feel like it. So that ends pages 1 and 2, which means we've reached the end, and you can then stack up your last and final page and add it with the instructions to the bag it came in until you're ready to adhere everything down, or you can go ahead and right now glue everything down, add your pictures, add your journaling in that order. I do recommend it. I recommend just finishing the pages as they are and then adapt your photos to fit to those pages, and I promise they'll be well balanced, they'll look gorgeous. And oh, I also want to point out to you as well, if you're new around here, that on the actual pictures of the pages, I have calculated the size, the exact size your photo would need to be trimmed to fit onto that page. So I've taken all the guesswork out. You don't need to like eyeball anything if you don't want to. You'll save a lot of time by simply looking at the instructions to know what size the photo needs to be, trim the photo to that size, and it will nest on there beautifully. Oh, I hope you give that a whirl too. So thank you so much for joining me for this class. I hope you had fun. I hope you love it. And if you get a chance, just leave a little comment for me at the end. I love to know that you're watching, maybe what you're learning. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you don't miss any future workshops, and give me a thumbs up. So all of that helps our channel, helps people become aware that we exist, because we don't have a lot of followers considering we're 25 years old. So give us a like, give us a subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in our next workshop. Thanks for joining me.